Close your eyes for just a moment. Can you hear it? The gentle, rhythmic clinking of glass milk bottles on the front porch as the sun begins to rise. Or maybe you can feel it, the crisp, almost stiff texture of a bedsheet just brought in from the clothesline, carrying the scent of sunshine and fresh air. These aren't just memories of things. They are echoes of a different way of life. A life that was, in many ways, more careful, more deliberate, and perhaps more connected. Today, we are going to travel back together, not just to remember, but to feel what it was like. We'll explore 20 forgotten frugal habits from the 1960s, simple acts of thrift that were once just life. And please stay with us until the very end, where we'll talk about a humble kitchen ritual that seemed to hold the entire family and the flavors of the season together. Before we begin, let's set the scene. Time itself seemed to flow differently back then, didn't it? It was a river, not a race. There were no push notifications, no endless scrolls demanding our attention. Waiting was a part of life. You waited for the mail to arrive, for your favorite show to come on the television at its appointed hour, for a long-distance call to connect through an operator. This built-in pause in our days gave us room to breathe, to think, to simply be. It's easy to look back and think that life without modern conveniences was somehow lacking. But the truth is, it was rich in other ways. Our emotional lives were nourished by face-to-face conversations over a backyard fence, by handwritten letters that you could hold and reread, by the shared work of a community. Frugality wasn't a trend, it was a deeply ingrained value, a form of practical wisdom passed down through generations. It wasn't about deprivation, but about resourcefulness, respect for what you had, and the quiet pride of providing for your family with your own two hands. Let's begin with the clothesline. It was so much more than a way to dry laundry. It was a backyard flag, signaling the rhythm of the week. Monday was often wash day, and the sight of sheets billowing like sails in the breeze was a universal sign of a home in order. The process itself was a physical ritual. The weight of the damp laundry in the wicker basket, the feel of the wooden clothespins in your hand, the satisfying snap as you shook out a towel before pinning it to the line. And the reward? Oh, the reward was a sensory treasure, the unparalleled scent of sun and wind baked into every fiber of your clothes and bedding. Nothing from a bottle could ever replicate it. Sleeping in the sun-dried sheets was like being wrapped in a warm, clean cloud. It was a simple act of partnership with nature, a free gift from the sky that made a mundane chore feel like a small, quiet victory against the chaos of the world. And what about our kitchens? Before the endless aisles of plastic containers, there was the humble glass jar. No jar was ever truly empty. It was just waiting for its next life. A jar of Welch's grape jelly, once finished, might become the perfect glass for a child's milk. Mason and ball jars were the stalwarts of the pantry, their primary role being the sacred act of canning. But their usefulness was boundless. They held buttons, nails, and screws organized and visible on a workshop shelf. They became impromptu vases for wildflowers picked by a child. You could pack your lunch in them, store leftovers in them, or even use them to catch fireflies on a warm summer evening. Every jar was a testament to the idea that things of quality were worth keeping and reusing. The heft of the glass in your hand and the satisfying pop of a freshly sealed lid were reminders of a household's thrift and foresight, a pantry full of provisions against the winter. Remember the art of mending? In our world of fast fashion, a torn seam or a hole often means a trip to the trash can. But back then, it meant a visit to the sewing basket. A patch on the knee of a boy's jeans wasn't a sign of poverty, but a badge of honor. It meant those jeans had seen adventures, climbed trees, and slid into home base. Mending was an act of love and preservation, the quiet concentration of darning a sock, weaving the yarn back and forth to create new fabric where there was once a hole, the whir of a Singer sewing machine hemming a dress or taking in a waist. Clothing was an investment, meant to last, and hand-me-downs were the natural order of things. A younger sibling inherited not just a coat, but the stories and warmth of the older brother or sister who wore it before them. It was a beautiful, unbroken chain of care. The peak of summer brought with it one of the most important rituals of all, canning and preserving. This wasn't a hobby, it was a necessity, a way to capture the fleeting bounty of the season. The kitchen would become a hot, steamy hub of activity. The sweet smell of boiling peaches or the sharp, vinegary scent of pickling cucumbers would fill the entire house. It was an all-hands-on-deck affair. Children would be tasked with snapping green beans or washing jars. The process was long and laborious, but the result was a jewel-toned library of summer's best, neatly lining the shelves of the cellar or pantry. Rows of peaches, pears, green beans, and tomatoes stood like soldiers, a colorful promise of warmth and flavor in the cold gray days of January. Opening a jar of home-canned peaches in the middle of winter was like opening a time capsule of sunshine. Nothing illustrates the waste not, want not philosophy better than the life cycle of a Sunday roast. That beautiful centerpiece meal was just the beginning of a week-long culinary journey. On Sunday, it was served hot and grand with potatoes and gravy. On Monday, the cold leftovers were thinly sliced for hearty sandwiches on rye bread, perhaps with a touch of mustard. By Tuesday, any remaining meat would be diced and stretched into a rich stew or a comforting shepherd's pie. And even when the meat was gone, the story wasn't over. The bones were simmered for hours with vegetable scraps, creating a golden, flavorful stock that would become the base for a nourishing soup later in the week. Every single part of that roast was used and respected. It was a lesson in creative cooking and a profound understanding of the value of food, ensuring that one good meal could provide comfort and sustenance for days on end. Long before we hauled plastic jugs of milk from the supermarket, there was the quiet magic of the milkman. His arrival was a gentle alarm clock for the neighborhood. You would hear the distant hum of his Divco truck, the clinking of the glass bottles in their metal carrier. You'd open the door to find your order waiting in the insulated milk box on the porch, the glass dewy with cold. This system was the original subscription service built on trust and routine. You'd leave the empty, rinsed-out bottles for him to collect and reuse, a perfect, closed-loop system of recycling. The milkman was a familiar face, a part of the community's fabric. He knew your family's order by heart. This simple daily transaction was a thread of connection, a reminder that your home was part of a larger, functioning neighborhood where people still delivered things right to your door. Who could forget the thrill of trading stamps? S&H green stamps, blue chip, or gold bond stamps were a kind of currency of loyalty. With every purchase at the grocery store or gas station, you were given a small number of these perforated stamps. The ritual was a beloved family activity. You'd come home, and the kids would be tasked with licking the stamps and carefully pasting them into the pages of the redemption booklets. The pages were filled with a sense of accomplishment. Filling a book and then another and another felt like building a small treasure. Then came the grand adventure, a trip to the Redemption Center. It was like a store where everything was free. You'd walk the aisles pointing at toasters, blankets, or maybe a fancy new set of dinnerware, all earned through weeks and months of patient saving. It taught a valuable lesson in delayed gratification and the power of small, consistent efforts. We lived in a world where things were built to be repaired, not replaced. The fix-it mentality was second nature. When the television went on the fritz, you didn't just buy a new one. You called the TV repairman, a local wizard who would come to your home with a case full of mysterious tubes and tools. He'd pull the back off the set and diagnose the problem, replacing a single, faulty component. The same went for everything from a toaster to a vacuum cleaner. Every garage had a workbench, and every father or grandfather seemed to possess a practical knowledge of how things worked. A drawer in the kitchen was filled with spare parts, screws, and bits of wire, just in case. This wasn't just about saving money. It was about self-reliance and a fundamental respect for the craftsmanship and resources that went into making an object. You understood your belongings, and you took care of them. The backyard wasn't just for playing. It was often a source of food. Many families maintained a small vegetable garden, a tradition that carried on from the victory gardens of the war years. It was a patch of earth that taught profound lessons about patience, nature, and the source of our food. The work was constant, tilling the soil, planting the seeds, the daily chore of weeding and watering. But the rewards were magnificent. There is simply no comparison to the taste of a tomato picked fresh from the vine, still warm from the sun, or the crisp snap of a freshly picked green bean. When the harvest was abundant, you didn't let it go to waste. You'd fill a basket with surplus zucchini or tomatoes and walk them over to a neighbor, who would likely return the favor with something from their own garden later on. It was a delicious, informal economy of sharing and community. For most families, there was just one car, and that single vehicle was a precious, shared resource that required planning and cooperation. It wasn't a personal convenience, it was a family utility. Getting to use the car was an event. It meant coordinating schedules for work, grocery shopping, and doctor's appointments. It fostered the growth of carpooling, with neighbors taking turns driving the kids to school or Boy Scout meetings. This limitation shaped our communities, encouraging local shopping since a trip to a distant store was a major undertaking. The family car was the vessel for Sunday drives, family vacations, and trips to the drive-in movie theater. We learned to share, to plan ahead, and to appreciate the freedom and adventure that a single automobile represented. It was a symbol of family unity, not individual independence. In a world before email and text messages, communication was a deliberate and tangible act. We wrote letters. The process itself was a ritual. You'd sit down with a piece of paper, a pen, and your thoughts. You considered your words because there was no backspace key. The physical act of forming the letters on the page connected your mind to the message. Then there was the trip to the mailbox, the sense of sending your thoughts out into the world, and the anticipation, the sweet anticipation of waiting for a reply. Checking the mail was a moment of daily hope. Seeing a personal letter, recognizing the handwriting on the envelope, was a genuine thrill. You could hold that letter, feel the paper, see the ink, and reread it as many times as you wished. It was a piece of someone, a tangible connection across the miles that felt infinitely more personal than a fleeting message on a screen. The public library was our internet, our movie theater, and our university, all in one, and it was completely free. A weekly trip to the library was a sacred family ritual. The moment you walked through those doors, you were greeted by a respectful hush, and that intoxicating smell of old paper, binding glue, and endless possibility. You'd run your fingers along the spines of the books, each one a doorway to another world. The librarian, who knew your name and reading habits, would guide you to new treasures. The checkout process was wonderfully tactile. The satisfying thump-thump of the date stamp on the card in the little pocket inside the back cover. You would walk out with a tall, teetering stack of books, a supply of adventure and knowledge to last the entire week. The library taught us to be curious, to care for shared resources, and to find immense joy and entertainment in the quiet, magical world of words. When you couldn't go out for entertainment, you simply created it at home. The living room was the stage, the game closet the treasure chest. Family game night was a fixture in many households. The fierce competition of a Monopoly game spread out on the floor, the quiet concentration of Scrabble, the laughter of a game of Crazy Eights. These weren't just games, they were platforms for interaction, conversation, and friendly rivalry. Families also gathered around the console radio or television to listen to a favorite program together, sharing the experience in real time. We learned to use our imaginations, putting on backyard plays, building elaborate forts from blankets and chairs, or simply lying in the grass and finding shapes in the clouds. Entertainment wasn't something passively consumed, it was something actively made, together. And those memories are often the most cherished of all. The brown bag lunch was an institution, whether it was an actual brown paper bag or a sturdy metal lunchbox featuring Hopalong Cassidy or the Beatles. The contents were a daily dose of home. The ritual of packing it in the morning was a quiet act of care. It usually contained a simple, no-fuss sandwich, perhaps peanut butter and jelly or bologna, an apple or a banana, and maybe a cookie or a Twinkie for a special treat. And, of course, the thermos, that miraculous container that kept your soup warm or your milk cold until lunchtime. Carrying your lunch was not only economical, but it was also a tangible link to home during a long school or workday. Opening that lunchbox was a moment of comfort and familiarity. It was a simple, practical, and loving habit that fueled generations of Americans through their daily labors. In the 1960s kitchen, fat was flavor and nothing was wasted, especially not bacon grease. By the side of almost every stove sat a dedicated container, often an old coffee can or a ceramic jar, for saving the rendered fat from frying bacon. This liquid gold was never, ever thrown away. It was a precious cooking ingredient. A spoonful of bacon grease in a cast-iron skillet was the secret to perfectly crispy fried eggs. It was used to wilt greens, to season beans, or to fry potatoes to a golden brown perfection. It added a smoky, savory depth of flavor that you simply couldn't get from anything else. This simple habit was a testament to the resourcefulness of the home cook, who understood how to extract every last bit of utility and flavor from a single ingredient. It was a small, everyday act of culinary wisdom. Our communities ran on an informal economy of goodwill and barter. If you ran out of a cup of sugar while baking, you didn't run to the store. You walked next door and borrowed one from your neighbor. This wasn't seen as an inconvenience, but as an opportunity for connection. You knew the favor would be returned in kind one day. This system of borrowing and lending extended beyond the kitchen. One neighbor might be good at fixing lawn mowers, while another had a knack for plumbing. Skills were traded as freely as produce from the garden. You might trade a dozen fresh eggs from your chickens for a jar of your neighbor's famous pickles. This constant low-level exchange of goods and services built a powerful web of interdependence and trust. It created a neighborhood where you knew you could rely on the people around you, fostering a true sense of belonging. The morning didn't begin with the beep of a machine, but with a gentle, rhythmic bubbling. This was the sound of the coffee percolator, a fixture on stovetops across America. Making coffee was a process you had to attend to. You'd measure the grounds, fill the pot with water, and place it on the burner. As it heated, you'd watch through the little glass knob on the lid, seeing the water bubble up and turn a richer and richer shade of brown. The aroma would slowly, wonderfully fill the entire house, a scent that was synonymous with morning itself. It required patience. If you let it go too long, the coffee would be bitter. It was a small skill to master. This slow, deliberate ritual was the complete opposite of today's instant coffee pods. It was a process that rewarded attention and signaled the true start of the day. Bread was the staff of life, and not a single crumb was ever wasted. When a loaf of bread started to go stale, it wasn't considered old. It was considered ready for its next transformation. The dry heels and slices were saved in a bag. Some would be put in a low oven to dry out completely, then crushed with a rolling pin or put through a grinder to make homemade breadcrumbs for meatloaf or breading for chicken. Other times, the stale bread would become the star of a magnificent, comforting dessert. Chunks of it would be soaked in a sweet, eggy custard and baked into a delicious bread pudding, often studded with raisins. This practice was born of necessity, but it was also a form of culinary alchemy, turning something that was past its prime into a dish that was deeply satisfying and beloved by the whole family. It was a lesson in seeing potential where others might see waste. Before the era of credit cards, if you wanted a large, expensive item you couldn't afford outright, there was a wonderful system called layaway. It was the epitome of delayed gratification. You would go to the department store, select the bicycle, the new television, or the winter coat you wanted. The store would lay it away for you in the back room, and you would make small, regular payments on it over a period of weeks or months. You paid for it before you owned it. There was a special kind of excitement in making that final payment. The clerk would bring your item out from the stockroom, finally yours, fully paid for, with no debt attached. The joy of bringing that item home was immense because you had earned it through patience and discipline. It taught a powerful financial lesson to save for what you want and to live within your means. One of the most popular and affordable forms of family entertainment was the Sunday drive. The destination was almost irrelevant. The point was the journey itself. After church and a Sunday dinner, the whole family would pile into the car. There was no GPS just a folded map in the glove compartment. Dad would drive, and you'd explore the winding country roads outside of town, windows down, the wind whipping through your hair. You'd see rolling fields, old barns, and small towns you'd never noticed before. Sometimes the drive would end with a stop for an ice cream cone or a soda pop at a little roadside stand. It cost very little, just a gallon or two of gasoline, but it provided hours of shared time, of conversation, of seeing the world together. It was a simple, beautiful way to connect as a family and escape the routines of the week. As we look back, it becomes clear we're not just nostalgic for the things themselves. It wasn't really about the mended socks or the glass jars. It was about the world that created them, a world that moved at the speed of a human heart, that valued resourcefulness over disposability, and that found wealth in community, not just convenience. We miss the feeling of competence that came from fixing something with our own hands. We miss the quiet satisfaction of providing, of preserving, of making something out of nothing. We miss a time when our lives were more deeply intertwined with our neighbors and the seasons. If these memories have warmed your heart and brought back a piece of your own story, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the past. It helps us immensely. But now, I truly want to hear from you. What is one frugal habit from your childhood that you secretly miss, or perhaps one you still practice to this day? Please share your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and your memories are the greatest treasure of all. Thank you for walking down this road with us today.